Good afternoon. This is your Pan-African show called Africa with your host, Asaror Seifu. Today is a special day for the entire continent of Africa. Today marks the 60th anniversary of our Pan-African organization called the OAU/now AU, Organization of African Unity, African Union.
In 1963, heads of state of 32 independent African states, as well as representatives from African liberation movements, met in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia to chart the way forward for a unified approach in the fight for complete independence and freedom of African people from the yokes of imperialism, colonialism, and apartheid. The desire for unity in action culminated in the historic creation of Africa's first multilateral organization, the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, and the signing of the OAU Charter on the 25th of May 1963, celebrated to this day as Africa Day. The OAU was the manifestation of the vision of an Africa that was united, free, and in control of its own destiny.
We have brought back a guest that we actually had before, but since she was part of the now AU, the old OAU, the beginning people that actually were part of the change makers, I would like to call her. So I invited her back again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you too for having me.
And if you could please introduce yourself once again.
My name is Hirut Bafakadu. I am Ethiopian. I did my education throughout at the, right here in the country, up to the university level. And I have been working here in Ethiopia for a long time until I moved out to an African country, Sierra Leone.
Brilliant. So I'm going to take you back to growing up, because one of the things that I've heard through family members is that you used to be a very shy lady or shy girl. And as a woman myself, you know, at some point in our life, we're always shy. And then somehow, because of certain elements, certain things that we did, we somehow overcome that. So I would like to know how your journey was, how you overcame that.
Oh, my goodness. Well, as you can see, age has got me so far. But my growing up time was very competitive. Very competitive because, I don't know if I should mention this, I had an elder cousin who happens to be her mother, who was very, very strong, very competitive, and was not afraid of anything. So I had to really live up to that example. And actually she did a lot in my life, because whenever we did something, we had to do it together because we grew up together.
Right.
And later on, even in the high school time, I was at the, first I was at the English school. From the English school, I moved to Kokobatsbach, Kadamai Leslasi Andanya Daraja, first day school. And from there, when I graduated from there, I joined the Addis Ababa University, which was then University College, because it was when we were, it was not really a university. It was it was while we were there that they said, oh, we have to graduate this to a real university, and joined up the Addis Ababa University, the Agriculture College, the Building College, the Engineering College, and the Agriculture College from Harar. They put all these together and said, this is the University of Addis Ababa, the university of the country. And, growing up, throughout the schooling time, we were very, very, very few girls in the class. Like when I was in high school, we were only 2 of us.
Wow.
And when we graduated and then joined the university college, there were only 5 of us. Actually, we did graduate, all 5 of us. It was good.
That's
because it was actually, because we were so few, the director of the Empress Menen School decided that all her 12th grade students should, whether they did okay with the examination or not for the university, she said, no, all of them should come to the university and have executive secretarial training. And though we were only, 19 of us or 17 of us, and 5 of us went to the university, the rest of them did executive secretarial training right there at Arat Kilo with us.
That must have been...
It is a very beautiful experience.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you see, they had built a dorm for girl students. And there are only 5 of us. Plus 2, 3, 4 who were in upper classes at the university. But the whole place was empty. So we were happy to have them with us.
That's lovely. You know, I'm glad you went into the university talk, because my next few questions are actually about the university.
Okay.
So I feel like our university back when you were a student was more Pan-African than it ever has been.
I agree with that.
So I would like to know how or why it became that way and why it didn't continue. And maybe you're not the right person to ask why it didn't continue,
Mm-hmm.
but because you were there then, you can tell us how the atmosphere and how Pan-Africanism was actually amongst students. Was it something that everybody wanted to be a Pan-African because of the people that were surrounded by?
If I can remember correctly, okay? When we joined the Addis Ababa University, it used to be called University College. There were 3 students from Ghana, 2 students from Kenya, who came and joined us. And this was also due to the wish of the emperor to have an African character into the education system, because he was always a Pan-Africanist himself,
Right.
you see? And whatever he did led to that. Now, these 5 or 6 students that were with us really became high personalities in their own countries when their countries became independent, because some of them were not even independent at that time. In fact, most of them. And the emperor's wish was to get a scholarship for these students who came from, some of them came from Kenya, 1 or 2 of them came from Ghana, 1 or 2 of them came from Uganda, I think, if I remember correctly, and Tanzania. And we have to realize that not many of the African countries were independent yet. So this was a pre-independence move that the emperor took. And these boys who came and joined us at the university, there was 1 girl from Zanzibar. That's where she was.
Wow.
Zanzibar. And Tanzania was not really Tanzania then. Tanganyika was there, Zanzibar was there, and then later on they joined up and became Tanzania. Now, it was a great experience for us because we never had this opportunity to mix and mingle and exchange ideas with
Other
fellow African students who went to a different kind of schooling, because most of them who came from English-speaking high schools, they were way ahead. In their English was much better than ours. Their also ways of analyzing African situations was more than we Ethiopians who were there, than us Ethiopians who were there, because we never had the chance. But it was an experience that made our, like myself, I'm a social and political science graduate from the Addis Ababa University. It made me feel Pan-African.
Right.
You know, it opened up my ideas. Of course, later on, chance had it that I joined an African organization and grew up in the African atmosphere.
Sounds very exciting. And then I have to actually, right around here, because it was, I believe, during your university days that Harry Belafonte had actually come to Ethiopia. Because I saw a picture of all these women, you being one of them.
Yeah, he did come. It was during my OAU days that Harry Belafonte actually came.
Okay.
And he felt he should visit, because many personalities, African personalities, European personalities, Asian personalities, did come to the OAU to visit the OAU, because the OAU was the only organization that actually encompassed the whole of Africa. Some people say, well, the ECA was there, but the ECA is United Nations. We know about the United Nations. This is an African organization made, built, organized, and structured by African countries that were independent at that time. And mind you, there were only, 33 African countries that were independent at that time. And later on, of course, as more and more countries became independent, then, of course, today we are a continent of 53 independent African countries. Some of them were not independent at that time yet. That's what the OAU's first resolution, the first resolution is on decolonization.
So we will take this opportunity to actually say congratulations on the 60th, because today actually marks the 60th anniversary of this organization. And I have to say congratulations to you, because you were one of the first that actually were there 60 years ago.
Thank you. But my age tells that. I am very proud to be 80 years old right now, and 60 years of the OAU. That means I joined when I was 20.
Exactly. So, again, happy anniversary on our 60th.
Thank you.
Now, before we get into the OAU, we have to talk about Gash Gadamu Abraha.
Oh.
So I would like to know who he is, how you met him, because I have a feeling he's the one that took you into the organization of the African Union.
Yes, Atu Gadamu Abraha. He was a phenomenal journalist. My goodness, if he puts his pen to a clean sheet of paper and he has a subject to write on, my goodness, 5 pages would come non-stop.
Wow.
He was, oh my goodness, he was a genius. You see, it was him, and there was also Atokifle Wadajo, who was our provisional Secretary General. It was later on that African countries got together and appointed Mr. Diallo Telly, who became the Secretary General. They were the provisional secretariat, and they worked for 3 years.
Wow.
Yes, we worked for 3 years before they appointed the actual Secretary General of the OAU.
Interesting.
Diallo Telly, the first one.
Okay. So now we come to the Organization of African Unity. What is the Organization of African Unity? And the reason why I'm going to the beginning is just in case somebody has never heard of the Organization of African Unity, now the African Unity. Oh, I right, the AU. What is it, and why was it important for us to actually have such an organization?
Oh, well, it started off with the Economic Commission for Africa, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, decided to have an office at the capital of Addis Ababa, right there. The African delegates at the United Nations felt that decisions on African problems should be studied and find African solution by Africans themselves. So when they got together in New York at the United Nations, they said, no, we should have our own organization. And because there was a Pan-African conference here before the OAU, which was organized by the emperor, they felt, yes, we should have our own. So they decided to go forward, and the emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, was very, very much interested because he was considered as the father of Africa. We have to realize that when things like this happen, other senior members like Jomo Kenyatta or Nyerere or Senghor were not even in the picture. It's the will and the push of the Emperor of Ethiopia that actually brought all Africans, independent African countries, here to Addis Ababa and say, okay, let's form our own organization. So that if we have, because you had asked me why, because if we had an African issue, we should all stand together. Right. And the only way we can stand together and have one voice is if we have our own organization.
Today brought together 32 heads of African states and governments in this historic city of Addis Ababa, in this beautiful setting.
So when they decided on that and decided to come to Ethiopia upon the invitation of the emperor again, and of course his foreign minister Tasfaye and Katama Ifruli, and later on Katama Ifru, and all these people got together. No, it's a few days. They got together and they said, okay, let's invite Africa here. The United Nations, as I said, ahead of them had said, all right, the Economic Commission, now this is Economic Commission for Africa, to think about the future, economic future of the continent, should have an office in Ethiopia. These people said, no, economic issues need an umbrella on top, which is a political decision. If you want a political decision, you bring all the African leaders here in Addis Ababa, get them together, let them form a union, and whether it's economic, whether it's cultural, whether it's education, then it will have a proper umbrella on top.
Being one of the first members of the OAU, later the African Union, which opened 60 years ago today, can you tell us a little about the founding fathers?
What would you like to know?
I would like to know how they were with each other, because I have a feeling there was such love and bond.
That's the picture over there.
Exactly. So, and the reason why I want us to go back and see our Pan-Africans back 60 years ago, and I would like to find out what went wrong, if anything did go wrong. Why weren't we able to go with what they came with? They were such fierce. They loved Africa, not only their country, like what's going on now, but they liked the idea of a one Africa.
Let's go back in history.
Okay.
Africa was colonized for 100+ years. Out of these colonization times came a moment when the world politics actually forced in quotation marks, the colonizers to give independence to the countries they're holding on to. Now, the history of colonialism takes you way, way back. I mean, later on, when the British government took over certain areas, they gave them names, like we'll give Kenya a name, Tanzania a name, you give Ghana a name, Nigeria, and so on and so forth. On the French also, Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, Senegal. And then you have Equatorial Guinea, the Portuguese. You know, all these came with the history of African colonialism and the international pressure on the then colonizing powers was so much, as well as internal, real, serious struggle by Africans themselves to get their independence, to get away from these colonizers, because there was an example country called Ethiopia, never colonized, and then later on followed by little Liberia, where it was an area bought and given to the people as per se. But, you know, a country like Ethiopia was an example. They want their independence. They want to decide everything for themselves. They didn't want to be dictated. And young students, African students, in all the colleges, the high schools, even abroad in England and in France and in elsewhere, they felt that Africa is theirs. And they wanted to come home and form their country. But after they did get their independence, they said, no, this is not enough. We are Africans. So we should be together as Africans. Even the North African countries, we call them the Maghreb countries, who are basically more Arab than African, they said, yeah, we are African too. We have to be together. We have to show the world that this is a continent unto itself. And colonialism is enough. So each country started gaining independence. And each one had an example, like, you know, there is a country, Ethiopia, never colonized. And this idea gave them a push, a real political push that actually got many of the countries independent. Now, after they got their independence and had their flags and everything, they said, well, we have to go to this country, meet together. And the emperor said, yes, I'm here. You better come. And invited them. Mind you, it was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs budget that actually invited all countries that came here first, because it was the will of the emperor. Of course, his ministers and deputies all went into it, and everybody
believed in it.
Yes.
So that was one.
Yes, we believed in it.
Yeah.
We were still in university, but we believed in it.
So what was the Pan-African ideals of the OAU founding fathers?
Number one, independence. Decolonization, as they call it. No more colony.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two was economic independence. But this came a little bit later on, because it took time all countries independent from their colonial powers, and then see how best that each of these African countries could say, yes, I have my economic power, I can join up. Like Tanzania would join up with Kenya, and Kenya would join up with Uganda. Uganda would join up with Central African Republic. This also came 10 years after the OAU was established. There was a special summit. The first one was basically a political charter that put together the OAU. The second one came as an economic charter. It was actually signed in Nigeria, Abuja, I remember. And all countries believed that they could contribute towards each other's economy so that Africa would become an economic power. This led, if I may remember correctly, to having all Africa trade fairs. And all countries came with their goods. What is it that we can exchange amongst each other so that we do not have to go to the European markets? We do not have to go to the Asian or American markets and be dictated by their prices. We have to be able to see if we can exchange. It was like the idea, the really basic intent was like barter. If you can produce coffee and I can produce tea, why don't we?
Why not do that?
Why don't we have the market between ourselves and sort of decide on the price ourselves and not the middleman or the European markets? This was a great big thing.
It really was, but obviously 60 years later we haven't done it because now we're talking about the same thing you obviously started 60 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And we still are not actually selling to each other or bartering with each other. We're still trying to lay out that foundation. So that's...
Yeah, I'll tell you the basic difference or the basic problem that got us all this was we still had to deal with our national currencies being backed up by the American dollar or the pound or the French franc. This actually was a pull. Every time something was started, they would kind of say, look, it's the French bank that gives you your currency, you know.
Exactly.
Or it would be the American...
the dollars.
The IMF that says, look, I can give you so much. Nonetheless, the African countries continued having their trade fairs.
Well, today we have met for the 60th anniversary of the African Union. And I would like to, I guess congratulate everybody on getting to this stage, even though we still have a lot of work to do. So I would like to say thank you to our guest for taking the time out to come out here and give us this wonderful interview. Thank you again.
Thank you too for having me.
Thank you very much for tuning in. This is your Pan-African show called Africa. And this is your host, Kazalor Ksefu. Tune in on Saturdays on Arts TV from 4 to 5. Happy 60th anniversary. Happy Africa Day.